I was a single step from the study door when my father's voice reached me. Come. Not angry, only certain. Your sister, she's not getting a single thing. She's out. I froze. The hallway went colder in an instant, the kind of cold that isn't air. Conditioning, but the knowledge that something can never be undone. I should have gone in. I should have said something. Instead, I didn't. Through the crack in the door, I saw Dad, Richard Morgan, reclining in his office chair, speaking to my younger sister, Melissa. She nodded once and stayed silent. Mom Janice stood behind them with her arms folded and a smile that wasn't amused tight, controlled. The smile of someone who knows their plan has succeeded. I don't remember backing away. I only know I walked past my old bedroom into the guest room where I'd been staying and opened my laptop. I moved every trace of my money savings, investment accounts, even emergency cash into a private fund they didn't know existed. One I'd opened years ago on a gut feeling I'd never explained. What they didn't know was that I also knew about the second trust. Grandma Margaret had set up before she died, the one she never told them about. It had just matured, and it wasn't small. That night, I didn't cry or scream or smash anything. I sat and stared at the glow of the transfer confirmation and understood that something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't their daughter in the way they believed. I was the person they'd assumed couldn't win Dan that would be their second mistake. This hadn't begun with that conversation. Looking back, they had been erasing me long before they spoke it aloud. It was in the Christmas photo Mom sent last year, captioned Morgan Family, full of love, in which I wasn't included. Even though I'd flown in 2 days earlier, baked 3 pies, and wrapped gifts until my fingers cramped. When I asked about the omission, she said, "Oh, honey, we took it while you were running errands." It just slipped my mind. I told myself it didn't matter until the subtle distancing began. Dad, ever pragmatic and controlling, started saying things like, "You're too emotional to handle a state business," or "This needs a rational head." Claire, my sister, who's 4 years younger, stopped answering unless she needed a document or a favor. Her messages breezy, as if we were still close, though the closeness had hollowed out. Our cousin Chase, raised almost like a brother, began calling me the martyr with a smile that carried a razor. Still, I kept showing up. I was there when Grandma fell the 3rd time. I read to her in hospice with a cracked voice and exhausted eyes. I gave up my consulting job to help Dad through surgery last spring. I paid the electric bill when Melissa maxed out her cards and covered Chase's debts when his gambling spun out. They never thanked me. They treated it as expected. Maybe that's where I mistook being needed for being wanted. The real cut came the night I overheard the second conversation. Dad's study door had been ajar, and his voice carried quiet, conspiratorial. "Don't tell her about the account," he said. "Say it was closed. Split it between us. Claire's out, she's been a burden long enough." Burden. That word echoed louder than any slammed door because it boiled down everything I'd done. The caretaking, the late nights, the silence, none of which had bought me a place. Instead, they made me disposable. I stood in the hall and breathed. Not from fear, but because a part of me was breaking the part that still wanted to believe this was a misunderstanding. That grief had warped them. But it wasn't grief. It was greed, and now they weren't hiding it. I couldn't sleep that night. Replaying Grandma's rasping voice from the hospital bed, "One day they'll turn on you. When they do, open the bottom drawer." At the time, I thought she meant something sentimental, a keepsake or letter. Now I understood she had seen this coming. The drawer, the mahogany top left of her writing desk, untouched since the funeral, held a small flash drive. A folded letter in her unmistakable hand and a cream envelope sealed with a notary stamp. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. "Claire, if you're reading this, they've already made their move. Blood doesn't make them worthy. Love doesn't make them loyal. Take what's yours and don't apologize." 4 lines, but they landed like thunder. I read them over and over. I wasn't crying yet, but something had shifted. Conviction, not sorrow or pure rage. The envelope contained an amended will, signed, witnessed, and notarized 2 weeks before she died. I read it word by word. It gave me 51% of the family business. Power of attorney over Dad's personal trust to rental properties in Oregon, and a locked investment account worth just over $1.20 to $2 million. She hadn't split things evenly or tried to please everyone. She had chosen me because I had stayed, because I had listened, because I had wiped her mouth and held her hand when no one else would. She hadn't given me power so much as proof that I wasn't imagining the distance, the silence, the smirks across the table, that somewhere amid their plotting she'd drawn a line and placed me on the side of truth. I sat motionless for a long time, holding that envelope as if it might disappear if I blinked. Let them try to erase me, I thought. Fine, let them strike the match. I'd turn their whole plan to ash. The next morning, I went into the kitchen as if nothing had changed. Dad, Richard, sat at the head of the table, flipping through financial reports. Melissa scrolled on her phone and chewed her toast as if it mattered. Mom hummed by the sink, stirring her tea in the same little tune she uses when she thinks she's won. "Morning," I said. Dad didn't look up. "We're busy, Claire. Can you give us a minute?" My smile was practiced. "Sure, just wanted to say congrats." That got his attention. He lifted his pen. His eyebrows knit. "On what?" he asked. I set the envelope on the table. "On handing me everything." Mom's hand jerked. Tea sloshed onto the counter. She didn't reach to wipe Aichi, only stared. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. I opened the envelope, laid the amended will between the butter dish and Dad's black coffee. Melissa stopped scrolling. Dad read the top line aloud, his mouth opening without sound. "That's not," he began. "Not real," I said calmly. Signed, notarized, witnessed. I turned to Dad. "You remember Beverly? Grandma's friend from the church group. She co-signed it 2 weeks before Grandma passed." No one spoke. Dad's growl was low, not loud. "You stole that," he said. "No," I replied, my voice steady. "I earned it." The silence that followed was thick and ugly. I let them sit in Ithelos, the shock, the dawning realization that the rules had changed. "You thought I'd go quietly," I told them. "Let you erase me with a smile and a folded napkin at Thanksgiving. But you underestimated me." Dad stepped forward, finger raised. "You listened to me," he started. "No," I said, louder but still controlled. "You listen. The account you tried to hide is frozen. I had the bank investigated the moment I heard your little speech last night." Melissa's face went pale. "What the hell is happening?" she asked. I looked at her. "Your inheritance," I said, "just slipped through your fingers." Mom's lip trembled. "This is your family." "No," I replied. "This is a lesson." Then I turned and walked out. Not running, not hiding. Simply occupying ground they never thought I would stand on. The office still smelled like my father. Old leather, strong coffee, and the faint, lingering bitter note of cologne. I hadn't set foot in the boardroom since I was 22. It's the last time I offered to help with a company retreat and was told to leave it to the real professionals. But on that Monday morning, I walked in through the front door, past the receptionist, who blinked twice before recognizing me and went straight into the send. Meeting Dad's partners were already seated. Thomas, Marianne, a few unfamiliar faces. Chase was there too, in a tailored blazer and that cocky lean he wore when he thought he had the upper hand. He didn't look up. I took the head of the table and sat down. His head snapped toward me as if pulled on a wire. "You don't belong here," he muttered. I slid the ownership documents across the table. "According to this, I belong exactly here. Read them carefully." Thomas cleared his throat. "We weren't made aware of this change in leadership," he said. I met his eyes. "You are now." The room was still absorbing it when the door burst open and Dad stormed in. 10 minutes late and breathing hard. His eyes scanned the table, landed on me, and he stopped mid-step. "This is a hostile takeover," he snapped. "No," I said. "This is a correction." He marched to the table and slapped his hand against the wood. "You don't have the experience." "I have the authority," I answered. "And starting today, every transaction over $10,000 goes through me." Chase's face went crimson. "You think you're going to run this place better than Dad?" he spat. I looked at him, really looked, and said, "Considering you've been using company funds to pay off your poker debts? Yes, I think I've got a decent shot." A sharp intake of breath ran the length of the table. Someone whispered to their neighbor. A phone appeared in someone's lap. Dad didn't move. He sank into his chair like the air had been pulled from the room. "This isn't just about power," I said. "It's about transparency, something this company hasn't seen since Grandma stepped down." Thomas nodded slowly. "She always said you were the one who asked the real questions." I gave him a thin smile. "She taught me well." When the meeting ended, most people left quickly, heads down, feet fast. Dad stayed behind and followed me into the hallway. "You're really doing this?" he asked. "You already did?" I answered. "When you decided I was disposable." He looked tired in a way I had never seen. Not angry, not dangerous, just hollow. "You'll regret this." I paused, my hand on the office door. "No, Dad, I regret trusting you. This is the cure." That afternoon, I called the audit team. We started with accounts tied to Chase, then traced Dad's shell companies, and finally Mom's consulting contracts. Files accumulated, clean names, dirty money. For the first time in years, something settled in me. Not satisfaction, not revenge, but clarity. The audit reports arrived faster than I expected and uglier than I hoped. Line after line of transfers labeled consulting routed to Chase's personal Venmo. Equipment rentals that never occurred. Offshore payments funneled through Dad's LLC. A six-figure account titled Golden Sun Ventures linked directly to my mother's name. It wasn't mere mismanagement. It was intentional and coordinated. They hadn't just tried to cut me out. They were bleeding the company dry. I sat at my desk long after the office emptied. Fingers cold on the keyboard, scrolling through page after page of financial rot disguised as strategy. This wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated theft. I gathered the documents and sent them to the legal team with a one-line subject. "Proceed." That evening, Chase showed up at the office uninvited. His shirt was wrinkled. He hadn't shaved. He looked like the walls were folding in. "You're going to ruin our lives," he said, voice cracking. I didn't look up. "You did that yourselves. I'm just holding up the mirror." He leaned forward, shaking. "You think this makes you some kind of hero? You're destroying your own family." I rose slowly, calm. Family doesn't build empires on lies. Family doesn't erase you and call it loyalty. Family doesn't smile while telling your sister to cut you out. His face drained of color. He opened his mouth. I cut him off. "You forged Grandma's signature on a withdrawal slip. That's a felony." He went quiet. "I gave you a chance to walk away clean," I said. "You stayed. Now deal with the fallout." His voice cracked. "You don't have to do this." "I don't have to," I told him. "I want to." He left without another word. Later that night, my attorney called. "We're ready to file criminal charges. Do you want to press forward?" I walked to the window and looked out at the company's sign, once a symbol of pride, now a name carved over decades of quiet deceit. "Yes," I said. "No settlements, no silence. We do it by the book. I want the truth in ink." By sunrise, the company website had a new leadership tab. My name, my photo, my mission. Underneath was a quote from Grandma. "If you can't trust the foundation, tear it out and start again." And that's what I intended to do. Tear out the rot. Brick by brick, name by name. The text came that afternoon. 1 hour. "No lawyers. You owe me that much." I didn't owe her anything, but I agreed. We met in the old church garden behind St. Mary's, where Grandma used to sit when she could still walk the same place. Mom pretended to tend roses while taking calls from the estate lawyer she swore she barely knew. She was already there in a white blouse, clean lines. So calm, like someone preparing for a press conference, not a conversation with her daughter. "I didn't sit. I have to hand it to you," she said. "I underestimated you." "You always did," I replied. She smiled faintly, eyes on the chapel. "You weren't trying to protect Grandma. You were trying to destroy me." "No," I said. "You did that to yourself. She turned to me fully. Her face didn't crack. "I kept this family running," she said, sharper now. "I made sure your father didn't lose everything after his third failed investment. I patched holes. I handled Chase and you. I didn't flinch. I was the only one not lying," I said. She stood slowly, brushed off her skirt like she'd just finished garden work. "You're going to win," she said. "We both know that." She stepped closer. "But what happens after you do? You think you'll feel peace? You think Grandma wanted the circus?" I looked at her and finally saw the woman I used to love trying to rearrange her face into something soft that no longer fit. "No," I said, "but she would have wanted the truth. She'd be proud that I stopped apologizing for existing." For a heartbeat, her mouth tensed, not in anger, but in something that felt closer to grief than it passed. She leaned in, voice barely a whisper. "Everything crumbles, Claire, even the truth." "Just wait," I didn't answer. I didn't stay to ask whether it was a warning, a threat, or a plea. I turned and walked away before she could turn it into another ending. The courtroom was colder than I had expected. Not in temperature, the air itself felt different, tense and still. As if even the walls were waiting to hear what could not be unsaid. Mom, Dad, and Melissa sat in a row, 3 faces, 3 masks, 3 ghosts of the family I once believed in. When my name was called, I stood, walked forward, raised my hand, and swore my truth. I spoke without shaking, not because I wasn't afraid I was, but because fear no longer controlled me. I had lived inside the silence they built. Now I would speak in a room they could not close. I laid out the timeline, the account transfers, the forged withdrawals the LLC Dad had created under false names, the consulting contracts paid to Mom's shell company, the bank alerts I'd triggered the moment I heard them say I was out. Then I paused. Before she died, I said, "My grandmother left me something else." I pulled out the flash drive and handed it to the bailiff. The sound system clicked. The courtroom waited. Then came the voice, faint but steady, worn by time and unmistakable. "Claire, if they try to shut you out, don't let them. You are this family's future, not their version of it. Yours." No one moved. No one spoke. Not even Dad. When it was Mom's turn, she rose as she always did at church. Slow, graceful, calculated. "We weren't trying to hurt her," she said. "We were trying to protect her. She's always been sensitive." I laughed out loud in front of the judge, not out of disrespect, but out of clarity. "Is that what you call erasing someone now?" "Sensitivity." The judge didn't flinch. Melissa looked down. Dad kept his eyes on the floor. By the time the testimony ended, the money barely mattered. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. It was about dignity, memory, and being seen. The gavel dropped. Final, full control of the estate remained with me. Melissa was ordered to pay restitution for unauthorized use of company funds. My parents were permanently removed from all fiduciary roles tied to the trust and family assets. It was official, public, irreversible, outside. Reporters waited like birds sensing blood. Microphones, cameras, questions I wouldn't answer. I walked past them, straight, quiet. I didn't owe them my outrage. Back at the lake house, I opened Grandma's journal to the page I'd marked months earlier. She had written, "Sometimes blood must be drained for a body to heal." Families are no different. I sat on the porch until the sun disappeared behind the trees. The air smelled like pine and memory. They had tried to bury me, and in doing so they handed me the shovel. But I didn't dig a grave. I built a foundation. By Monday morning, the transition was complete. Deeds, titles, names on the papers, all mine. The lake house sat quiet in the haze of early autumn. Yellow leaves drifted down the front steps like someone letting go too gently. Inside, the air felt different again. Not empty, but unoccupied, as if it had been waiting. The business bore my signature now. The accounts were in my name. The legacy they tried to erase was, ironically, held together by the one person they tried to cast out. I didn't host a celebration. I didn't call anyone. I opened Grandma's old cedar chest, placed the amended will beside her journal, and closed the lid. No speeches, no final words, just the quiet act of returning something to where it belonged. That night, I left the windows open. I wasn't afraid anymore. There were no voices behind walls, no footsteps down the hall, only the soft wind off the lake and the memory of someone who believed in me before I believed in myself. They had called me weak, emotional, a burden. But every time they erased me, they sharpened me. Every silence they forced became a sentence I would one day speak aloud. And when they finally handed me the shovel, the tool they thought I'd use to disappear quietly, I didn't dig a grave. I built something stronger. Now the house bears my name. The business wears my values. And I sleep with the windows open, not because I've forgiven them, not because I've forgotten, but because I am no longer afraid.